This video is going to show you a solo Grandmaster Nightfall getting Platinum rank with a unique build that revolves around your melee, poison damage, and arc damage that you put out. We're on a Arc Warlock with the necrotic grips, the exotic gauntlets, which give you poison damage over time to melee damage that you put out. That with that being uncharged and charged melee damage that you do. So I'm running Ball Lightning on a Arc Warlock, which is a ranged ability, melee ability. We have Chain Lightning, but Chain Lightning will only proc when you are in a close proximity of enemies, so that wouldn't really work as well as Ball Lightning, and Ball Lightning puts out decent damage. I could have done this on Stasis. I could have done this on Solar. I don't recommend it on Void because the Void Walker melee ability is poor, whereas the Stasis melee ability and the Solar melee ability, Celestial Fire, which is very similar to sort of with similar in usage to Ball Lightning in the way it works. It's actually a little bit better. It has tracking to Celestial Fire. You have the other melee trick that Solar Warlock has, but I think a Celestial Fire Warlock would be good with this. But I think even better is with Ball Lightning because you have access to powerful arc mods this season, and Ball Lightning in itself, since Arc 3.0 came out, has actually had a couple of buffs. When you're amplified, for example, it does more damage, and as I say, it's going to spread the poison damage when you melee a champ, enemies, what have you, right? We also have the exotic auto rifle Monte Carlo on to help us keep getting our melee charge back. So I have a couple of numbers regarding Monte Carlo, which I'll get into after this section here on what it does, right? Because it does a lot, does Monte Carlo, and it's getting a catalyst next season, which will turn it into a pseudo auto rifle / glaive, which is going to be an insane thing when that comes out. That's actually going to be something I'm looking forward to. But for this first room, what I consider to be the first room, we want to make sure that we kill this barrier right here. This barrier, the AI of the barrier is dictated by the two acolytes that surround the barrier. So if you kill both acolytes, the barrier will run to the wizards for safety. We don't want that to happen because he'll have to deal with him later on and he's a pain like that. So that's why I use a super for him. Now notice that I skipped the previous hive barrier. Why? Well, because we didn't skip the overload at the very beginning. We killed him on purpose. So we have a free token. You can skip any champion that you like. Not two, only one. Pick the one that you want to do. I choose to skip the first barrier that you see, not the one I just killed, the one before this, because he's the most awkward champ in this GM. So we'll just skip him. The overload at the beginning isn't awkward at all, and our setup is pro overload, like pulse grenades being able to stun, jolt being able to stun. We have the good scout rifle on to stun. So overloads in this aren't a problem, right? High barrier knights, when they keep dodging and all that stuff in a close proximity zone, it's annoying. So I choose to skip him rather than the overload. With this section here, you want to focus mainly the Fallen, because the Hive will obviously focus the Fallen, right? Which means that we can take out most of, especially the champ and everything, and really just let the enemy types fight each other. Whenever this happens in the game, when you're in a GM, or it doesn't really happen in dungeons because you don't generally get two enemy types fighting each other. It has happened, Grasp of Avarice for example, but it's very rare that it does. But so in a GM, it's generally when you're going to see it, where two enemy types are fighting. Let them fight each other. Take the best thing, take down the hardest enemies first, and work that way. Always when there's two enemy types like that. We'll get our scan. We're going to do the defend section, the 3 waves. What I like to do is come over here for phase 1. Get a pulse grenade down. A couple of the Thrall was still alive. I didn't know this. This actually worked in my favour because the Thrall fought the Fallen there briefly. Just meant that I didn't get damaged much. So this is where I like to fight from generally on phase 1. The only problem here isn't the overload, but it's the Arc Captain, which the Arc Captain wasn't killed. And he kept pushing me from an awkward angle. But generally, The Arc Captain isn't much of a nuisance as he was on this particular run. We'll get a pulse grenade down, hopefully get a stun, which we did, but he was stunned behind cover. The Captain we need to take out. He's a problem right now. Use our strafe. He's literally a one shot. That's fine. Let him retreat. Get a healing rift down. I've got a super to burn as well. Now, obviously we're not on Geomag stabilizers because we're using necrotic grips. The Geomag stabilizers build is better than the build that I'm using. But I'm using this build to spread the awareness of Monte Carlo on what it does before next season with the catalyst comes out, because it already does a lot. So I'll talk about that now while not a lot's going on. So Monte Carlo has intrinsic rampage, right? We all remember rampage times 1, times 2, times 3, right? Well, currently in the game, rampage stacks out at 3 stacks, 32 or 33% damage bonus. Markov Chain, the perk for Monte Carlo, stacks at 5 and gives you a 13% damage bonus per stack, which stacks up to 65% total, right? This can be instantly, you can instantly get 65% damage total extra bonus if you get a melee kill. Or you kill an enemy, you get an extra stack, etc. Which lasts up to nearly 5 seconds. So you get, you know, and you can really get the damage output for Monte Carlo to increase. Which also gives you melee energy, right? Ability energy, 2% per hit, but also has a chance to fully refund your melee ability energy as well, which is RNG. But if you're fighting a tanky target, a champion, this weapon's perfect for champions because, or tanky targets, because you're gonna get your melee energy back super fast, which is really good. It means I can keep poisoning enemies, right, and jolting them. So I'm jolting them and I'm poisoning them with 1 melee ability. So save one champion, I'm soloing a champ. I could melee him 3-4 times back to back. This is really strong. As I said, it's not as strong as Geomag stabilizers or maybe Vesper of Radius, but I'm not really bothered that it isn't as strong, because I still want to show it off, because as I say, it's going to be trending. Monte Carlo is going to be trending next season. So I figured I'd get to it early and show you a build before that. There are other builds you could do. You could run Monte Carlo on a Titan, Symphoceps, Peregrine Greaves, stuff like that. Or you could run with a Hunter. There is some melee based builds. I'm not on about Arc now. I'm not on about Punch Dodge. There is a Solar Knife build that you can do to output its damage and stuff like this. It's very niche, if I'm being honest, but I think Monte Carlo right now as it is, I really like it on a Warlock. That's my favourite at the minute, because everything you can do is it's a ranged melee that's super reliable, a bit more reliable than Hunter Knives, if I'm being honest. Although Hunter Knives are alright, especially the Fan Blade on Solo Hunter, right? But mainly the Warlock has better melee abilities all around. Celestial Fire on Solo Warlock. Stasis melee is okay. It's a little funky to use though. I don't really like it that much, but I do know it's got a bit of potency. But really it's a Celestial Fire or Ball Lightning. Those two melee abilities in particular are really good. Especially Celestial Fire because it has tracking, right? So if we do get an unstoppable melee next season, which I have a hunch they might, remember unstoppable melee, so if you can stun a champion with a melee ability, right? If they put that up next season, then that's going to open a couple of things, right, for builds and stuff. Obviously you've got Strand as well. Now the Strand melee ability on Warlock is actually strong as well. So you're going to double down on the Strand damage that you do, and you're going to add poison damage to that, and that's also going to be a decent versatile build. I just didn't really want to run Strand for this because Strand's quite slow for Devil's Lair, and the best class to solo Devil's Lair, on the ability side of things, what element you go with is Arc. Just because of the Arc clear potency, Arc's super strong this season, so I didn't want the run to drag, because if you do run a handicapped element, your run will start to slow up 40 minutes plus, and I didn't really want to do a 40 minutes plus run on a easy GM. So yeah, this build's, as I say, really good. So I've still got access to my Chaos Reach, which is going to put out a good amount of damage. It allows us to nearly almost 1 KO a champ. Not quite, but if I get a Pulse Grenade down as well, then I am going to 1 KO that champ, which is a useful skill to have. We're using Doom of Chelchis, which is a fantastic scout rifle. I can't understate how good this scout rifle is. Probably the best element scout rifle in the game right now. Especially the fact that it has access to being able to be crafted, which I haven't crafted it. And it also has access to double damage perks. So I've got Explosive Payload / Focus Fury. Those 2 perks stack on the gun. And not to understate its range. See, what you need to understand with scout rifles, and I already understood this a long time ago, because I done a test way back when with scout rifles. Does range matter on a scout rifle? That test was a long time ago, but it doesn't matter. That test is still viable from what I've done. And what I found out is with the rapid fire frame scouts, they suffer. The faster fire rate of the scout, the more they suffer with range, and it really does hinder their damage. Because we're coming up to the battlefield zone where range on your scout does matter, right? Because Monte Carlo is good at what it does, but it's an auto rifle. Intrinsically, it is an auto rifle, so it isn't going to do well at the outside section. It's Overload Scout, so I needed a Scout one anyways, and the Scout does a better job than what the auto rifle would ever do on this long range engagement. I'm talking 40 meters plus. Once you start to fight, even say 35 meters with the Monte Carlo, you start to suffer. Its range start right 50 with Catalyst. Well, not Catalyst, with its well, that's what its stats is, right? On not obviously not with Catalyst because it hasn't got it yet. It's 50 start range and it's a 600 RPM auto. Now 600 RPM autos are in PvE okay. They're all right. They're the middle balance between the 720s and a high impact auto, and 600 RPMs are all right. They're good. Scateflock, that's an example of one. They're good. They're an all-round auto rifle, I would say. A good middle ground between range and damage, but they, because of how auto rifles work, it's been the same since Destiny 1, Destiny 2. They are outclassed by pretty much every other guns in the game, right? Quicksilver Storm's an exception. I know people are going to say, well, Quicksilver Storm's one of the best guns in the game. Yeah, it is, but that's only because it's an exotic primary that has a 40% damage bonus. Monte Carlo also has this, and don't get me wrong, that 20 to 30 meter range, you're going to melt with Monte Carlo, yes. But above this, it's a useless weapon. But it's not Monte Carlo's fault, it's just how the game is made, right? When you're up against longer range distances, the pulse rifle and the scout rifle have a much better place, even the bows, of course. So that's its weakness. Monte Carlo's weakness is that it's an auto rifle. Just imagine for 1 second Monte Carlo was a pulse rifle. I know that it's not, but just imagine it was. It wouldn't suffer from the range drop off that it does right now. Like if I start using it now on these GMADs at 40 meter ranges, Monte Carlo won't even be able to hit the target. It'll be just be able to briefly hit him. And that's its weakness. But every exotic auto has that weakness, apart from maybe Quicksilver Storm. But even with Quicksilver, you would suffer on this outside range. But the thing with D2 is that most of the encounters are designed to be within 20 to 30 meters anyways. Look at all the recent latest stuff, right? There's no long range engagements really, because Bungie doesn't want you fighting from that far distance like we used to do in D1 when you're on Mars and stuff and you're fighting the Cabal from like 60, 70 meters away. Scouts were king in D1. They were king in D1. They don't want Scouts to be king in D2 because somebody in Bungie somewhere hated that. It's a funny story, but I loved it. I loved that the Scouts were king. They're not going to be next season because hand cannons are going to be fantastic, and I'm looking forward to that because I do miss using Fatebringer in PvE. Sunshot is usable right now. Malfeasance is melting right now. I don't know what's going to happen with Malfeasance. Is he getting the buff? Is it a blanket buff to hand cannons, Or is it a blank buff to only legendary hand cannons and then exotic hand cannons are just staying the same? I don't know. But hand cannons are going to be crazy to use. And I'm looking forward to using a legendary hand cannon in PvE. But scouts, they still need a little bit of a help. They still take slightly too long, well not slightly but quite a lot, to kill minor red bar enemies. I'm not bothered about the damage they do on a champ, because if you just saw there, I was actually doing some sizable damage there with doing with Chelchis to that Overlord champion. So I'm happy with the damage that they do like this. Not the gameplay you're seeing right now, but damage that they do to champs, but not to miners and orange bars. Like, look at this. I know we are standing from quite far away, but the damage they do is, like I say, poor-ish. It's gotten better because they did give him a blanket 10% buff, I believe. Honestly, at this point, it's hard to really keep a track on Destiny 2 and its history of weapons and what buffs they've done when, spanning over 2-3 years. It's very difficult to keep a track of all this stuff. I think it was 10%. I think everything else got 20%, and scouts got 10 because they didn't. Again, it's the same philosophy of they don't want scouts to be king because they have the range that other weapons don't. My argument to that is, though, they're happy to have bows to be king, right? Because bows have, I know the lightweight bows are suffering right now, and they've said that lightweight bows are suffering at range, but intrinsically how a bow works, they have basically infinite range. Not infinite range, it is to a point. The accuracy stat will impact how good a bow is at range, but for the most part, the weapon, a legendary bow is the best legendary weapon that you can run in PvE right now. I know there's no artifact mods for bows right now, but whenever there is, like, it's best in slot. Whenever Overlord bow is up, you can use a legendary bow. I know we've got Arc, but you can use a legendary bow in PvE GMs, and you'll feel good using it. It'll feel effective. So that's what I'm saying. They're happy to have bows put out the damage at a longer range, and they're happy with that. But then on the one hand, they say, well, we don't want scouts to be king because then they're the best in slot from all ranges. And I don't agree with that because we've had bows be best in slot. I know for most of you that isn't the case because they feel quite niche to some players, but the players who are in the know or have been in the know since 2019, bows have been literally the best weapon archetype that we've had for GM gameplay. And I know that because I've played through every single meta since then. So I'm just saying, I'm questioning their design philosophy on that. That they're saying they don't want bows to be best in slot because they're good at range. Well, so are bows. But we've had those best in slot. So I question whoever said that when they did. With the outside section, it is safer to fight from the left-hand side. Really because of this broken bridge. If you see the bridge in front of me, right? The bridge is broken. The tank literally cannot see you at all from left-hand side. So fight from the left-hand side. This helps you deal with everything. The snipers, the vandals, any dregs that push. And it deals with the brigs. Right? On left-hand side, there's so much cover. Look at all this. So I can actually keep proccing Monte Carlo on these brigs and keep meleeing them over and over. I'm not doing it right now because I'm getting pressurized by this sniper to the left. But I have the opportunity to do that. I'm going to get a good pulse nade down here because we broke the faceplate off the brig. So we've got not only a pulse nade, we'll get some damage in. Monte Carlo's doing good damage from that range. Like that range you just saw me there, that's a range that it's effective at. Any further than that, then it's going to suffer. Just because it's an auto rifle. It's not Monte Carlo's fault. It's just the archetype of the weapon that it is. We're now going to exclusively use the scout because it's going to put out good damage with explosive payload. Not Focus Fury though, because the faceplate's not blown off. But I can actually just overload the brig. Yes, you can just overload any enemy in the game. You'll know this by the proc display on the left hand side, overload shot. This has some actually, it makes the behavior of the enemy change. Look at this pulse nade. If you're telling me I'm not good at pulse nades, here we go, look at this. I'm only joking. But yeah, overload shot on enemies will make them more passive more docile to you. So he's not spamming his attack, the Brig, as much as he generally would, because he's getting overloaded. And we're being able to put damage out to the Brig without having to handle dodging or evading a tank. This is just smart play. It means that we can deal with both Brigs on left hand side. It means we aren't spawning in any unnecessary waves of adds that generally would happen. So if you break the tank's a leg off the tank, you will spawn in the next Overlord champion. We don't want that to happen until we kill the barrier, because what's going to happen is, right, the tank's just sitting there, right, open for attack. Very easy to damage the tank. But that's where people fall into the trap of, I'll do the easiest part first, but then it progressively gets harder because you didn't understand that burning the tank spawns in more enemies, which means the barrier will spawn in. The barrier will tether all those extra waves of enemies that spawned in. And if a Overlord champ gets tethered by a barrier champ, you are then just asking for disaster, because then you have to deal with the barrier first, and the Overlord's going to keep shooting at you. You might get naded by a couple of the dregs, and then that's a bad combat experience. So everything that you do, you need to set up for a good combat experience to make your life easier. Don't make your life harder on purpose unless you can deal with the next situation that you put yourself into. Like right now, we're not pushing past the red box, because the red box in front of me spawns in another Overlord. Right? So we're not going to have that happen until we deal with this barrier, which I've saved as Super 4. It just makes it easier. It saves on ammo a little bit. I don't want to spam too much linear ammo, because we're going to exclusively use a lot of it on the tank. This speeds up the tank section. It means that you're going to leave the tank section at like roughly 25 minutes, 23 minutes, depending if you use the exact right build. Like if I went all out, Geomag stabilizers, done all my efficient ad clearing on the previous encounter, which you saw the farm run. I've actually posted a farm run up. It'll have been when this GM was last up. I posted how to farm this GM, like exactly what to do at every turn. So I've done that. But this isn't really a farm run per se. This is more so to show you an effective build being used in a GM that isn't the go-to build. Which, more on that, I've saw a couple of YouTubers have complained about the state of the game. I don't mean the state of the game post. I mean the state of the game in general for PvE, which is also suffering. I know people keep saying about PvP, the state of the game for PvP. I know the state of the game for PvP is terrible. I know that. It has been for a long time. But what people have fallen into the trap of is that, oh, well, Bungie does focus on PvE for the state of the game. Yeah, they do, but it's still in a bad state. Not in a bad state. It's getting looked after. I'm not going to lie. They're doing a lot of balance patches, and I'm looking forward to next season and on the changes that they've made. They're looking after it enough, but there's been some wrong decisions made over the last 3-4 years with PvE that has progressively made it too niche and too easy at the same time. In certain scenarios, resilience is one thing, but I don't go too far and say that resilience needs nerfed, because I know that that's not the answer. It isn't the answer to have an RNG stat like resilience, what it used to be. Resilience in PvE for Destiny 2 only used to work in lost sectors. Do you really want to go back to that? Are you for real? People who say this, let's nerf resilience. Alright, do you remember what it used to do in 2017 to 2019? Well, further than that, 2020. Do you remember what it used to do? It only affected lost sectors. That meant in GMs there was more RNG to get one shot. That has now thus been fixed with the resilience stat. There's less BS in GMs now, but it's intrinsically made it more approachable to do a solo GM, right? But GMs are in a weird spot anyways, just because us not with the selector node, not coming right away at the start of the season, not being able to target focus certain GMs, which why we lose a CP when we complete a GM because they don't want us target farming a particular GM on double loot weeks. Why not? Let us. What's the problem? Let us do that. Why not? And if they're saying it's the players' fault, well, players aren't playing Glassware to double farm loot. They'd rather play Lake of Shadows, the old Lake of Shadows, not the new one. Right, that's not the players' fault. That's your fault. That's your fault that people who want to farm Lake of Shadows. But they addressed that by changing Lake of Shadows, which intrinsically made Lake of Shadows one of the worst GMs now in the game to play. Literally. Team-wise, it won't be, but solo it is. It is one of the worst GMs. It's terrible to play. So there's two ends of the spectrum, and they can't get it in the middle. It's always, well, this GM's far too easy. Right. Now it's unplayable, virtually. It makes no sense. So it's hard to fine-tune. I guess it's hard for them as well. I'm not saying it isn't. Listen, it must be, because there's no other video game that's doing what they've done in the last 10 years. So it must be difficult. I'm just saying, though, it's quite obvious to me what they need to do. Me looking at it. And somebody somewhere down the line is making decisions that some players agree with, some players don't. It's a very difficult situation, isn't it? But I'm just saying, as I say, PvE isn't in the absolute best meta. It will be next season, potentially. All the changes that they've announced are fantastic. The Monte Carlo cart list and all that stuff, if they do this right, it could be a fantastic season. And Destiny 2 is always like that. Like, when it's hot, there's nothing competing with the game. There's nothing competing with it. When it's dry, people are playing other games. Likewise, myself have been. But that's the thing with Destiny, and it's always sort of been like this. I know, like, people are thinking it's the worst time ever. It's not, by the way. It's not the worst time ever. It's kind of bad. Well, quite bad, but I don't think it's the worst time ever. We have had worse times than what we are experiencing right now. There's a lot of things in the game, the quality of life, that's good, but it's not the absolute worst time, and we have got, as I say, things to look forward to. So with this section here, with the overloads, it's nice if you can get a jolt off, because then you can double stun overloads. Because even though I'm only aiming at one of the champs, right, I'm also jolting the other one. I was just actually slowish here. If you saw that, I was just slightly slower getting to him. If I had Void Loader on, see, I ran Arc Loader, which was a mistake. I should have ran Void Loader on my gauntlets, because I'm mainly using the Scout. That was one slight thing with the build I should have changed. But other than that, I was happy enough with this run on how it worked out for me. And as I say, I was loving Monte Carlo in this, especially when I could back-to-back poison with the ball lightning on a target. You'll see that coming up. I'll point it out when that happens. And just every now and then being able to do it. But what I will say is Monte Carlo's power next season will be based on, for me, if there's a champ mod in it. If there's no champ mod for Monte Carlo next season, right, then everything what they're doing could be all for nothing. Cart list might be good and golden, but if I can't run Barrier Auto or Overload Auto on Monte next season, or if they do, I don't know what mod they're doing, then it's all for nothing. So I don't know whether they're going to give it an intrinsic champ mod. It'd be nice to see them do that. I don't know what would be the best choice. Maybe Barrier Auto, probably. If they don't give it an intrinsic, they need to give it. They need to have auto rifles as an intrinsic mod for the artifact. But we've already just had it. But they'll have to do it again. Because as I say, if they don't do that, it's going to spoil the whole thing. And it literally could be one of the best things that they've done with like a original exotic like Monte Carlo, a very old Destiny 1 style exotic. Which they just need to do more of this. They don't necessarily need to keep giving me new exotics all the time. Rework what we've got. Make a base of this if it's successful. Start reworking some other stuff that we've got in the game. Some old exotics that don't have catalysts to start making them and give them the same treatment. The Doom of Chelchis is really good for this little bit because I'm going to be able to take down the Void Servitors quickly, faster than any other, faster than if I ran, say, an Arc Scar rifle. Because even though, yes, you don't need to match shields, what people forget is when you do stun a shield, you get that explosion effect, so you are able to take down shield targets a little bit quicker. It's not the fact that the shield's the problem now. It's just that you get that extra shield explosion, and it is nice. So there is still sometimes a reason to match a shield, especially if you've got shield break charge. See, I didn't put shield break charge on my gauntlets because it was +4 and I couldn't fit that on my gauntlets. If it was a +1 shield break charge, I would have had that on, because that means I have access to surges if I get the armor charge, right? So whenever you're fighting in a activity with a lot of shields, and an example is the Nord.Avalon mission on Legend, all those actually harpies, you can make a build around that because of how many shields there is and stuff like that, and making all the orbs of power. So there's oh, that was a previous mod, sorry, that isn't what I'm on about. There was a mod where you broke a shield, you made an orb. That's an actual artifact mod, it's not in the game now, but you do get an armor charge when you break a matching shield. It's just a point that you can put that on if you wanted to. Just means you wouldn't have as many loaders or whatever. You might have to run a minor spec on the gauntlets, whatever it might be. So we're going to get the final servitor week. We obviously used a combination of linear fusion rifle ammo plus super to get the boss to a third right away. We went up the stairs to commit to that, so that we do it in a wanna, so that we're not messing around between phases. So when we do our damage, we do a third, so the boss goes immune straight away. We're going to do that same strategy again. To pull that off though, you need the battlefield clear. All dregs need cleared, or most of them at least. There should be no shanks, which shanks are infinite. So when you've cleared a wave of shanks, they will come, but it'll be like 45 seconds later on. I don't know what the time is on the shanks. So we'll do a bit of damage with the linear. We'll wait for teleport, because the boss will always teleport. We do super after teleport, then we'll do any damage we can up here. Get the boss to a third. This does look risky, but it isn't. It isn't as risky as you might think. Right? And then we're just going to run down here, because then that is when it's kind of getting dangerous. Because the Overlord champions and stuff start to collapse on you. But if you do it right away, like I did, where there's no ads, and you do your DPS, then you can quickly do you can get your Chaos Reach out the sooner, the quicker you start to build on the next one, right? Quicker you use that Chaos Reach, the quicker you get your next one, because we do want another one up, and we're going to use that for the what I would call the Rogue Overload that does happen on this phase. See, to understand that, you need to first understand what Overlord champions like to do. And their AI pattern behavior is based on the number of enemies surrounding them, and based on how many Overlord champions are alive. So if there's 2 Overlords, both of them will be happy to push you all day. They'll push you all day, and you have access to both. When you're solo though, you might not be always able to kill both of them on a succession like that. So you might have to, like right in this situation, I have to focus solely on one, right? But when that happens, as soon as one of the Overlords, see that? If you didn't see it, play it back. As soon as that happens, the Overlord ports to top, where I was doing DPS before, and will stay up there, or he might go to the back of the map, because now he doesn't want to fight you all of a sudden. So then it's the ads that you focus a little bit, but you don't need to clear every single ad right at this minute. It's just to build the super energy, which we do have now. I'm going to do my preps right with the servitors, so we want to get all servitors killed, and then the final servitor weak. We're not obviously going to break that shield just yet, because I want to clear out this Overload. Now the point in case, remember before at the start of the video I said you can skip any champ that you want. This champion could be skipped if you have killed every other single champ that you've encountered. So the hive barrier, the first hive barrier that I skipped, I could have killed him It would just, and then skip this particular overload that hides if I really, really wanted to. And that would be a strategy now, thinking about it, if you wanted. Because he is a pain. Right now I don't know where he is, but you've got to expose yourself to go and find him. So before I do all that, we want all the servitors taken out. I also recommend potentially using a super on him if you want, because we are going to get one anyways, because there's a certain amount of enemies I recommend that you kill on phase 3 to a certain extent. Overload is pushed. Notice, why did the overload push? Well, because there's a higher number of enemies on the battlefield, so the overlords are a little bit more confident. They pack in numbers. They hunt in numbers like a wolf. That's what they do. So he's pushed a little bit. AI pattern has changed. Gives us a chance, once most shanks are killed, to get a pulse nade and a super and quickly take down the overload. So now we've dealt with that little situation. My heavy ammo situation's good, healthy. I don't need 17 shots for phase 3. So we're going to use a bit here and speed it up with the servitors. Because remember, we've just done a wave of shanks, but they are on a timer, so they're going to come back out. So I actually want to take out these servitors quickly while there's no shanks. Because if I mess around too much, I'm going to get another wave of shanks up during DPS, which is dangerous for the way I do it. We've actually got some poison damage on the boss, which is fantastic, which does reset onto a new target. So I'm going to get that, whatever that poison damage is, assisting me, which is really nice. I'm going to do as much linear damage as I can, right? But I don't want to overcommit to damage, because there are enemies coming, but they take, as I say, like 10 seconds to get there. So you've got like 10 seconds of free damage, I would call it, until you've got to back up to your safety net. Right, we're back here. Then we'll do a bit of ad clear, because if you've got too many ads up here, when you go downstairs to do the damage, like what most people do, you might get naded or tracked with their arc shots quite a lot. So if you overcommit to damage on phase 3, when there's a lot of ads up top, there's a chance of death possible. It's like a 50-50 thing, depending on how many ads are up there. But if there's not many ads up there, like what you've just saw me do, clear out some of them, then you can safely do a lot of damage down here. You're going to see I can do like 5-6 shots consecutively, whilst also building super, because that's really ideally what I'm wanting, is my super to finish the boss off. We've run out of heavy anyways, just about to get my super, so I'm going to do a pulse nade or whatever just to finish off. Plus, if I got amplified, I would get electric armor, which I didn't. I'll use my super to finish off the boss downstairs, but that was a solo GM using Monte Carlo with a poison build. I hope you enjoy. Thank you.